The resource-based view, or core competence approach, is more internally orientated than the Porter 5 Forces approach. It looks inside organisations for the source of superior performance. The starting point here is to say, Porter's 5 Forces is fine for understanding average performance in an industry, but any average conceals some who do better and some who do worse. Managers want to know how their organisations can beat the averages. Indeed, if you return to the Fortune 500 largest corporations data and you look inside the industries, you soon see a wide distribution. The figure shows the investors' return of several computer firms. As before, the average is 13.7%. But some firms do much better, like Dell, making 52% per year. And some firms do much worse, like Gateway, with a miserable 1% investors' return per year. The strategist wants to know how to be more like Dell, not just the average. The resource-based view argues that superior performance will not likely be won by imitating Dell, but by doing something different. Its key question is, what can you beat competitors at? And it approaches this by asking what special resources and competences you have. Resources can be thought of as typically nouns, for example machinery, oil fields, shops, brands, people, or knowledge. Competences can be thought of as verbs, in other words, competences in exploring for oil, managing brands, or acquiring new knowledge through learning. These competences involve process and activities, doing stuff. If you're going to beat the competition at something, you're going to need very special resources and competences. There are 4 criteria people stipulate. First, and most obvious, the resources or competences must be valuable to customers. Rolls-Royce Motor Company lost its independence because its cars, however luxurious, were no longer valued adequately by customers. Second, the resources and competences should be rare or even unique. If you're going to be different, you must have something that your competitors do not have. Apple in the computing industry has competences in designing computer hardware and software that very few companies can match. Third, the resources or competences should be robust. In other words, durable and hard to imitate. IBM lost its advantage in the PC industry because so many people could copy its basic designs, so that in the end it has sold its PC business to the Chinese manufacturer Lenovo. Finally, the resources or competences should be non-substitutable. The traditional Encyclopaedia Britannica, with its many printed volumes, had a wonderful resource in its huge databases of knowledge. But free alternatives such as the volunteer-based internet encyclopedia Wikipedia, or even search engines like Google, have proven to be very effective substitutes for traditional printed encyclopedias. The criteria of valuable, rare, robust and non-substitutable are pretty tough ones, and this tends to narrow down the areas in which you might choose to compete. The figure illustrates the impact of this kind of reasoning. The bottom horizontal axis represents the range of businesses you might be in, with at the midpoint what people call your core competence. This core competence is the kind of business where your resources and competences give you greatest competitive advantage. You have valuable, rare, robust and non-substitutable resources and competences to apply to the business. The vertical axis represents profitability, with halfway up the break-even point above which you make a decent return. You can easily imagine a profitability curve on this figure, with the highest profits made close to your core competence, right in the middle at point A. For a supermarket chain, let's call it green, we might call this its basic grocery business. As the supermarket diversifies into new businesses further away from its core competence, its competitive advantage gradually declines. For this supermarket, DIY stores and even clothing might be close enough to the core competence to earn reasonable profits, even if they are lower than in its original business. After all, these would involve similar competences at purchasing, choosing locations, managing people, and ensuring good stock turn. But going further away from the original core competence, into, for instance, retail banking on the one hand or a state agency on the other, might be steps too far, leading to negative profits. In the figure, any activity beyond points B and C would be unprofitable for the green supermarket. What range of activities then should the supermarket undertake? Everything between points B and C, including DIY and clothing? That seems to make sense. After all, they're all profitable. Other things being equal, you certainly wouldn't want to drift further away from your core competence, because that means certain losses. So, operating just in the zone between B and C is what a conventional analysis of the situation would say. This is where the core competence notion of doing something unique and better than your competitors kicks in powerfully. A conventional analysis of the situation lets you do too many things not very well. You need to add the core competences of potential competitors. What if there is already somebody whose own core competence is exactly DIY? Let's call it Blue Company. And another whose core competence is clothing. Let's call it Red Company. The figure begins to look a bit different. The people who make most money at DIY are Blue Company. The people who make most money at clothing are Red. Now it doesn't look so sensible for the Green supermarket to enter these activities. Other things being equal, Green's shareholders certainly would want Green to stick at what it's doing best. If they wanted their money to be invested in DIY and clothing businesses, they would invest directly in the people who are already best at them, Blue and Red. If Green did decide to tackle Blue and Red in these businesses, it would be at a distinct disadvantage. Blue and Red could afford to cut prices or raise their spend on marketing and still make money. If Green tried to enter a price war or match the higher marketing spend, it would be they who would be pushed first into losses. Blue and Red could very likely drive them out of business. The core competence notion of doing something unique and better than your competitors forces you to concentrate on your specific zone of advantage, close to your core competence. For Green, this zone of advantage is much less than the whole range of possible activities B to C. Its zone of advantage is just groceries. Even if it could make money outside this zone, it doesn't make sense for shareholders, and it would be catastrophic if stronger competitors fought back. Thus, the core competence notion is a radically narrowing one. It forces you to decide what you do best and stick to just doing that. If somebody else is better at the activity, let them do it. The core competence message is: keep focused.